Hello friends, my name is Arshan and today we are gonna do the chapter 1 of your History NCERT textbook. The first chapter is Tracing Changes Through 1,000 Years. Now, you may see an image of a map. This map is made in 1154 CE by an Arab geographer Al-Idrisi. In this section reproduced, here is a detail of Indian subcontinent from his larger map of the world. Now, see the map 2. This was made in 1720 by a French cartographer. You may also think, what is a cartographer? A cartographer is someone who makes maps. Now, these two maps are quite different, and though they are of the same area, in Al-Idrisi map, South India is where we would accept to find North India, and Sri Lanka is the island at the top. Place names are marked in Arabic, whereas some well-known place like Uttar Pradesh's Kannauj can be seen. Now, let us talk about the map 2. In the map 2, you can see the detailed versions of Indian coastline. These maps are made in a difference of almost 600 years. During these 600 years, the time information about the subcontinent had changed considerably. These maps seem more familiar and different. Whereas the European sailors and merchant has used the maps of French cartographer for these voyages to come to India. These facts are very important. Equally important is the fact science of cartography, which is different in both of these periods. When historians read documents, maps and texts from the past, they have to be sensitive about the different historical backgrounds, that is, the context in which the information about the past was produced. We will learn about all this in this chapter, so let us have a go. Now, we will learn something about new and old terminologies. If the context in which information is produced changes with time, what about language? And what about meanings? Have you ever thought that? Historical records exist in a variety of languages which have changed considerably over the years. Medieval Persian, for example, is very different from the modern Persian which nowadays people use. The difference is not just with regard to grammar and vocabulary. The meaning of words also change over time. You may ask how? Let me give you an example. Take the term Hindustan. For example, today we understand it as India, our modern nation, our Bharat Mahan, right? But when the term was used in the 13th century by Minhaj-e-Siraj, a chronicler who wrote in Persian, he meant the areas of Punjab, Haryana, the lands between the Ganga and the Yamuna. He used the term in a political sense, that was a part of the dominions of the Delhi Sultan. These areas included in this term shifted with the extent of Sultanate, but the term never included South India. Are you getting my point? It means that they are calling Hindustan only for the regions of Delhi Sultanate. By contrast, in the early 16th century, Babur used Hindustan to describe the geography, flora and fauna and the culture of inhabitants of the subcontinent. This was somewhat similar to the way the 14th century poet Amir Khusro used the word Hind, while the idea of a geographical and cultural entity like India did exist, but the term Hindustan did not carry the political and national meanings which we associate it with today. For example, Hindustan for us means the area from Jammu and Kashmir to Kanyakumari, from Gujarat to the seven sister states, but at that time this was not the case. Historians today have to be very careful about the things they use because they meant different things in the past. Take for example a simple term like foreigner. It is used today to mean someone who is not an Indian, who is from an XYZ country. But in the medieval period, a foreigner was any stranger who appeared to stay in a given village, someone who was not a part of that society or culture. For example, in Hindi, we call them Pardesi. He can be from a different city, different town, etc. To describe such a person, in Persian, the word Ajnabi is used. You may also understand the meaning of the word Ajnabi. A city dweller, therefore, might have regarded a forest dweller as a foreigner, but two peasants living in the same village are not foreigners to each other, even though they may have had different religious or caste backgrounds. Historians use different types of sources to learn about the past depending upon the period of their study and the nature of the investigation. Last year, for example, you might have learned about a great ruler of the Gupta dynasty. He was Harshvardhana. In this book, this year, we will read about the following 1000 years from roughly 700 to 1750. You will notice some continuity in the source used by the historians for the study of this period. They still rely on some coins, inscription, architectures and textual records also for getting the information. But there is also some considerable discontinuity. These number and variety of textual records increased dramatically during this period. They slowly displaced other type of available information. Though in this period, paper gradually has become cheaper and hence a lot of print materials can be known and seen. People use that cheap paper to write holy text, chronicles of rulers, letters, teachings of saints, positions and even judicial records, and for registers of accounts and taxes also. Manuscripts were collected by wealthy people, rulers, monasteries and temples, etc. etc. You might even have seen a manuscript in your nearby temple. They were placed in libraries and archives. These manuscripts and documents provide a lot of detailed information to historians, but they are also very difficult to use. Why are they difficult to use? See, the thing is that at that time there was no printing press like now, so the manuscripts are copied by hand. Now, if you have ever copied a friend's homework, you might know that it is not a simple exercise. You have to do a lot of hard work. Sometimes you cannot read your friend's handwriting. Sometimes you cannot guess what he is writing. As a result, there are small but significant differences in your copy and your friend's copy. Copying a manuscript is very much similar. As scribes copied manuscripts, they also introduced small changes. A word here, a sentence there. There are small differences which over centuries grew a lot until the copying of manuscripts are being done. And when the main results, or in today's time the things came out, the difference was substantially very much. This is a very serious problem because we rarely know the original manuscript and the author which has copied that manuscript today. We are totally dependent upon the copies made by later scribes. As a result, historians have to read different manuscripts of the same text to discuss what is the actual thing written, what are the changes and what may be the actuality. On occasion, authors revise their chronicles at different times. For example, the 14th century chronicler Ziauddin Barani has wrote in his chronicle first in 1356 and then he wrote another version 2 years later. The two differ from each other, but historians do not know about the existence of the first version. Until the 1960s, it remained lost in large library collections. Now, we will learn about new social and political groups. The study of the 1000 years between 700 and 1750, it is a huge challenge for the historians, largely because of the scale and variety of developments that has occurred over the period. At different moments in this period, new technologies came and made their appearance. For example, the Persian wheel, which is used in the irrigation, the spinning wheel in weaving, which even Gandhiji used to use, the firearms in combat which a policeman uses. Some new foods and beverages, they have also arrived in our subcontinent. For example, potatoes, corns, chilies, tea and coffee also. Remember that all these innovations, new technologies and crops came along with people, cause those people brought them here. Now they brought some ideas as well. As a result, this was a period of economical, political, social and cultural changes. You will learn about all these changes in your upcoming chapters also. This period was also a period of great mobility. Groups of people from different places used to travel. They travel long distances in search of opportunity. Our subcontinent, the Indian subcontinent, held immense wealth and possibilities for people to carve a fortune, as you might have also heard about this idiom known as India, a sone ki chidiya. One group of people who became important in this period were the Rajputs. The name derived from Raja Putra, that means the son of a ruler. Between the 8th and 14th centuries, the term was applied more generally to a group of warriors who claimed Kshatriya caste status. The term included not just rulers and chieftains but also soldiers and commanders who served in the armies of different monarchs all over the subcontinent. The chivalric code of conduct, extreme valor, and a great sense of royalty and loyalty were the qualities attributed to Rajputs by their poets and bards. Some other groups of people such as the Marathas, Sikhs, Jats, Ahoms, Kayast also used these opportunities of the age to become politically important. Throughout the period, there was a gradual clearing of forest and the extension of agriculture. People used to cut forests to get agricultural land to grow crops for themselves. This change was faster and more complete in some areas than in others. Changes in their habitat forced many forest dwellers to migrate. Others started filling the land and became peasants. These new peasants groups actually began to be influenced by regional markets, chieftains, priests, monasteries and temple. Just like we are today, we are even inspired or influenced by our regional markets. They became part of large complex societies and were required to pay taxes and often goods and services to the local lords. As a result, significant economic and social differences emerged amongst peasants. Some peasants possessed more productive things, more productive land. Others also kept cattle. Some combined artisanal work and agricultural activity during the lean season. As a society became more differentiated, people here grouped into jatis or subcaste and ranked on the basis of its background and their occupations. Ranks were not fixed permanently, but they varied according to the power, influence and resources controlled by the members of that subcaste or jati. The status of the same jati could vary from area to area. Their own rules and regulations to manage the conduct of their members also, these rules were used. These regulations were enforced by an assembly of elders, described in some ideas as the Jati Panchayat. You might have also noticed a Jati Panchayat is in the form of a Gram Panchayat. But Jatis were also required to follow the rules of their villages. Several villages were governed by chieftains. Together, they were only one small unit of a state. Now, let us learn about region and empires. Large states like those of the Cholas, which you will learn in chapter 2, Tughlaqs in chapter 3, and Mughals, which you will learn in chapter 4, encompassed many regions. A Sanskrit Prashasti in chapter 2 you can see for an example, which praised the Delhi Sultan Ghiyazuddin Balban, who ruled the Delhi Sultanate from 1266 to 1287. That explained he was the ruler of a vast empire that stretched from Bengal Gauda in the east to Ghazni Gajjana in Afghanistan in the west and including all of the South India, Dravid. People of different regions, Gaur, Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, Karnataka, Maharashtra and Gujarat apparently fled before his armies arrived. Historians regard these as exaggerated claims of conquest. At the same time, they try to understand why rulers kept claiming the control over different parts of the subcontinent. By 700, many regions already possessed distinct geographical dimensions and their own languages and cultural characteristics. You will learn more about these things in the upcoming chapter 9. They were also associated with specific ruling dynasties. There was considerable conflict between these states also. Occasionally, dynasties like these, Cholas, Khaljis, Tughlaqs and Mughals, were able to build an empire that was pan-regional, that means spanning diverse regions. Not all these empires were equally stable or successful. Compare, for example, in table 1. You may also see chapter 3 and 4. What was the duration of the rule of Khalji and Mughal dynasties? You will get all these information. In 1315, one poet, Amir Khusro, noted that there was a different language in every region of this land. Sindhi, Lahori, Kashmiri, Dwara Samudri in southern Karnataka, Telangani in Andhra Pradesh, Gujri in Gujarat, and Malbari in Tamil Nadu, Gauri in Bengal, Awadhi in eastern Uttar Pradesh, and Hindavi in the area around the Delhi. Amir Khusro went on to explain a lot of contrast in these areas. There was Sanskrit also, which did not belong to any region according to Amir Khusro. It was an old language and common people do not know it, only Brahmins do. You can also do an activity by noting all these languages which Amir Khusro spoke of and make a list that nowadays where are these languages spoken. Now, did you know that the Mughal Empire declined in the 18th century and it led to its emergence of regional states, which you will learn in chapter 10 also. But years of imperial pan-regional rule had altered the character of the regions. Across most of the subcontinent, the regions were left with the legacies of big and small states that had ruled over them. This was apparent in the emergence of many distinct and shared traditions. In the realms of governance and management, of the economy, elite cultures and language. Though the 1000 years between the 700 and 1750, the characters of different regions did not grow in isolation. These regions felt the impact of larger pan-regional forces of integration without ever quite losing their distinctiveness. Now students, let us learn something about old and new religions. As you know, in this long period of 1000 years, religion has also changed. The 1000 years of history that we are exploring witnessed major developments in religious traditions. People belief in the divine was something deeply personal, but more usually it was collective. Collective belief in a supernatural agency. Religion was often closely connected with the social and economic organization of local communities. As the social world of these groups altered, so too did their beliefs. It was during this period that important changes occurred in what we call today Hinduism. These included the worship of new deities, the construction of temples by royalty, and the growing importance of Brahmins, the priest, as the dominant group in society. Their knowledge of Sanskrit texts earned them, the Brahmins, a lot of respect in society. Their dominant position was consolidated by the support of their patrons. You may also ask, what is a patron? A patron is a new ruler searching for prestige who support these artisans or Brahmins. One of the major development of this period was the emergence of the idea of bhakti, of a loving personal deity that devotees could reach without the aid of priest or elaborate rituals. You will be learning about all these things and traditions in the upcoming chapter 8 also. These were the period where the new religions appeared in the subcontinent. Merchants and migrants first brought the teachings of the Holy Quran to India in the 7th century. Muslims regard the Quran as their holy book and accept the sovereignty of this one God Allah, whose love and mercy and bounty embrace all those who believe in Him without regard to social background. Many rulers were patrons of Islam and the ulema, that means the learned theologians and the jurists. Just like Hinduism, Islam was also interpreted in a variety of ways by its followers. There were the Shia Muslims who believed that the Prophet Muhammad's son-in-law Ali was the legitimate leader of the Muslim community, and the Sunni Muslims who accepted the authority of the early leaders, Khalifas of the community, and the succeeding Khalifas. There were other important differences as well. For example, between the various schools of law, that is Hanfi and Shafi, etc., mainly in India, and in theology and mystic traditions also. Now, thinking about time and historical periods, let us discuss more about this. Historians do not see time just as the passing of hours, or days or years as a clock or a calendar. Time means the reflection of changes in social and economic organization, in the persistence and transformation of ideas and beliefs. The study of time and transformation of ideas and beliefs is easiest by dividing the past into large segments or periods that possess different or some shared characteristics. In the middle of the 19th century, British historians divided the history of India into three periods: Hindu, Muslim and British. This division was based on the idea that religion of rulers was the only important historical change and that there were no other significant developments, for example in the economy, society or culture. Such few historians follow this periodization today as well. Most look to economic and social factors to characterize the major elements of different moments of past. The histories you read last year included a wide range of early societies: hunter-gatherers, early farmers, people living in towns and villages, also early empires and kingdoms. The histories you will be studying this year are often described as medieval. You will find out more about the spread of peasant societies, the rise of regional and imperial states, the formation, sometimes at the cost of pastoral and forest people also, the development of Hinduism, the development of Islam as major religions, and these 1000 years of Indian history and its witnessing of the considerable changes. After all, the 16th and 18th century were quite different from the 8th or the 7th century. Therefore, describing the entire period as one historical unit is not without its problem. Moreover, the medieval period is often contrasted with the modern period. Modernity came with it a sense of material progress, intellectual advancement. This seems to suggest that the medieval period was lacking in any change whatsoever. But of course we know during these 1000 years the societies of the subcontinent were transformed often and economies also. In several regions it reached a level of prosperity that attracted the interest of European trading companies. Now can you give me an example of a European trading company? I am sure you might be knowing it and you might have heard it a lot of time also. As you learn about this book, look out for the signs of change also, the historical processes at work. Also, whenever you can, compare what you read in your history book and with what you read last year. Look out for the changes and continuities wherever you can, and look at the world around you to see what else has changed or remained the same. Till then, bye bye.